Getting started with the Russians is somewhat more polar than most tech trees. With the Brits, you get a pair of good vehicles, and here you get one absolute banger and another that is less so. We'll be looking at the good side of that bargain with a low-tier rundown of the BT-5 light tank. The vehicles at 1.0 are a real mixed bag. Most are okay, some are dog, and a few are phenomenal. Even if you've not played the starting vehicles for all of the tech trees yet, a good way to determine which is which is to see whether or not they make an appearance in games much higher than 1.0. There are only a few that you'll notice often, and the BT series of tanks are probably the most common. So what makes the BT-5 able to stand up at higher BRs and dominate at 1.0? I think the answer fundamentally is that it's a complete vehicle. What I mean is that most tanks at 1.0 have at least one major shortcoming. They're too slow, or the gun is off, or they can't turn the turret in time. The BT-5 has none of these issues, and on top of that, even excels in some areas. The armor is very typical for this tier, which is to say thin, around 15mm on average for the hull and turret, but it's well sloped. The hull is this kind of pike-shaped front, which means the effective armor thickness for head-on shots is closer to 25mm, which is really good. The turret face is round, so shots at the edges of the turret will bounce. Normally decent armor on a tank means a slow beast, but not so here. The BT-5 has a top speed of 53 km an hour, which you can reach easily with its high acceleration, both on and off-road. The turning circle is also tight at high and low speeds, so you can juke incoming shots or maneuver through buildings without grinding to a halt. Continuing down the long list of strengths, the K20 45mm cannon is found on all of the BT series vehicles and is quite punchy. It's accurate and relatively flat shooting as well, so long-range engagements are doable. The turret rotates at a respectable 11 or so degrees a second, and the gun can be depressed to -8. For ammo types, I prefer the default BR-240 APHE BC shells, as they have an explosive filler and only 3mm less penetration than the solid shot SP rounds. Okay, so what, if anything, is not ideal about the BT-5? It's a fairly large vehicle, not wide but long, so it gives a big target side on. Apart from that, the only other negative is the bizarrely slow elevation and depression rate of the gun. Seriously, don't look into the sky for a prolonged period when driving this thing. It will take an age of man to get it back to the horizontal. With all these strengths, there are a lot of ways you can drive this vehicle well. You can do the standard light tank routine and get to a dominant spot quickly to pick the enemy off. You can certainly brawl at close range if need be, though the large size of the tank makes this not ideal. The rarer, more annoying for the enemy and arguably chattest way to drive this vehicle is to just run people down. This playstyle is available to only a few of the light tanks in the game at any tier, and the BT-5 is probably the first you'll encounter. The speed, turret traverse rate, and high penetration means you can just drive up behind people, one or two tap them at close range, and then repeat. This is almost bullying at 1.0, with its plethora of slow-turning, slow-turreted vehicles. And if you run up against something you can't kill, you're not obligated to take the fight like usual. You can just drive away. It's amazing. You will find many of your opponents using the BT-5 in that fashion, especially players with a fair bit of experience in the game. A few things you can do to bop them. Like the A13 Mark I, the BT-5 needs its speed to survive. If you can, hit the vehicle in the rear third, which is where the engine and transmission is, to stop it completely. So you have the vehicle stopped, hit it in the side of the front third, and you should get at least 2 crew. In general, you want to avoid the middle of the tank, as there's a large empty space behind the turret ring, and the fuel tanks and radiators are stacked in protective layers around half the engine. While this seems minor, the BT-5 is weirdly survivable sometimes, and you may not get another shot. Typically, you should have the penetration to go through the front armor, but if it's a close thing, your best hope is to hit flush on the turret ring, even under the gun mantlet it's thin. Another quick tip, because of the shape of the front of the hull, it's not a great idea to angle the BT-5. These mudguards on the side of the vehicle are not armored and only provide minimal protection, so that if you angle, the hull underneath will be flat to the shooter. They do, however, protect the vehicle from HE and heat shells, which detonate on impact. Right, so the BT-5's rating then. A vehicle with next to no faults and the ability to play beyond 1.0? As you can probably surmise, it's an S. Easily one of the best tanks to try if you want to get a sense of what War Thunder can be. Next up, the BT-5's red-headed stepbrother, the T-26.